Greta Garbo. Greta Garbo, the enigmatic star of the silver screen, was known for her reclusive nature, but few realized the depth of her fear of crowds. This wasn't just a preference for solitude, it was a paralyzing dread that shaped her entire career. At the height of her fame in the early 20th century, Garbo would go to extraordinary lengths to avoid public appearances. She refused to attend premieres, skipped award ceremonies, and even avoided walking the streets of Hollywood. Her fear wasn't limited to fans or paparazzi. She reportedly felt overwhelmed by any gathering of people, no matter how small. What's even more surprising is how this fear influenced her iconic performances. Garbo's ability to convey deep emotion on screen was partly born from her isolation. She once insisted on filming scenes with as few crew members as possible, creating an almost eerie intimacy in her work. After retiring in the early 1940s, she vanished from public life entirely, retreating to a private apartment in New York City. For decades, she lived in near total seclusion, walking the streets in disguise and refusing interviews. Her fear of crowds wasn't just a quirk, it was a defining force that shaped her legacy as one of Hollywood's most mysterious figures. Bela Lugosi. Bela Lugosi, the man who brought Dracula to life in the early 1930s, was haunted by a fear that seemed almost ironic, an intense dread of being buried alive. This fear, known as taphophobia, wasn't uncommon in the early 20th century, but for Lugosi, it became an obsession. He reportedly insisted on sleeping in a coffin during the filming of Dracula, not as a publicity stunt, but as a way to confront his fear head-on. Lugosi's phobia was likely influenced by his upbringing in Hungary, where stories of mistaken burials were a frequent part of folklore. In an era before modern medical advancements, the fear of being mistakenly declared dead was very real. Lugosi's fixation on this fear extended beyond his personal life. He was known to carry a small mirror with him at all times, using it to check his breath during moments of anxiety, as if to reassure himself of his well-being. What's even more unsettling is how this fear stayed with him throughout his life and into his final wishes. Lugosi famously requested to be buried in his Dracula cape, a decision that some interpreted as a way to ensure he would be recognized if he ever awoke. His fear of being buried alive wasn't just a private struggle. It became an eerie part of his legacy, blurring the line between the man and the monster he portrayed. Katharine Hepburn. Katharine Hepburn, one of the most celebrated actresses of the 20th century, was known for her fierce independence and commanding presence. Yet, beneath her confident exterior lay an unusual and deeply rooted fear, a paralyzing dread of public speaking. This fear wasn't just a mild discomfort, it was a lifelong struggle that shaped her career and personal life. Despite her ability to deliver powerful performances on screen, Hepburn avoided public appearances whenever possible. She rarely gave interviews, and when she did, her discomfort was palpable. What's even more surprising is how this fear extended to her work. Hepburn was known to rehearse her lines obsessively, not out of perfectionism, but because she feared forgetting them in front of the cast and crew. Her fear of public speaking was so intense that she once turned down an opportunity to perform on stage in front of a live audience, despite her love for theater. Instead, she focused on film, where the controlled environment of a set allowed her to manage her anxiety. Even in her later years, when she was hailed as a Hollywood legend, Hepburn's fear of public speaking remained. She famously avoided award ceremonies, including the Oscars, where she won 4 times. Her fear wasn't just a personal struggle, it was a hidden vulnerability that contrasted sharply with her image as a strong, fearless woman. Peter Sellers. Peter Sellers, the comedic genius behind iconic roles like Inspector Clouseau in The Pink Panther, was a man of many faces and many fears. Among his most unusual phobias was an intense fear of being alone. This fear wasn't just a passing discomfort, it dictated much of his personal and professional life. Sellers was known to surround himself with people at all times, whether it was friends, family, or even strangers. He reportedly kept his home bustling with activity, as the silence of solitude was unbearable to him. What's even more fascinating is how this fear influenced his work. Sellers was a master of transformation, often immersing himself so deeply into his characters that he seemed to lose his own identity. Some have speculated that his fear of being alone was tied to a deeper fear of confronting himself. This may explain why he was so drawn to acting. It allowed him to escape into the lives of others. Sellers' fear of solitude also affected his relationships. He was married 4 times, and his need for constant companionship often put a strain on his personal life. Even at the height of his fame in the mid-20th century, Sellers struggled to find peace. His fear wasn't just a quirk, it was a driving force behind his relentless pursuit of success and his complex, often troubled, personal life. Clark Gable. Clark Gable, the king of Hollywood and star of Gone with the Wind, was the epitome of masculinity on screen. Yet, few knew that Gable harbored a surprising and deeply personal fear, a profound dread of flying. This fear wasn't just a minor inconvenience, it was a phobia that shaped his choices and haunted him throughout his life. Gable avoided air travel whenever possible, opting for trains or cars even when it meant long, arduous journeys. What makes this fear even more striking is its origin. Gable's fear of flying reportedly stemmed from a distressing experience during World War II. As a member of the United States Army Air Forces, Gable flew on several missions, including one where his plane faced intense danger. Although he survived, the experience left a lasting impression on him, and he avoided flying whenever he could after the war. This fear also influenced his career. Gable was known to turn down roles that required extensive travel by air, limiting his opportunities in an industry that was becoming increasingly global. Even in his later years, when he was no longer actively acting, Gable's fear of flying remained. It was a hidden vulnerability that contrasted sharply with his image as a fearless, larger-than-life figure. Joan Crawford. Joan Crawford, the glamorous and commanding star of Hollywood's golden age, was known for her meticulous attention to detail and her unrelenting drive for perfection. Yet, behind her polished exterior lay an unusual and consuming fear, a deep aversion to uncleanliness. Crawford's fear of germs and dirt was so intense that it bordered on obsession, dictating much of her daily life and interactions. She was known to wash her hands frequently throughout the day, often to an excessive degree, and insisted that her home be kept in immaculate condition at all times. This fear extended to her relationships with others. Crawford reportedly required her staff to adhere to strict hygiene standards, and she would often inspect their work personally. Visitors to her home were sometimes asked to wash their hands upon arrival, and she was known to avoid physical contact, such as handshakes, whenever possible. Her fear wasn't just limited to her personal life, it also influenced her work. On film sets, Crawford was known to bring her own utensils and dishes, refusing to use anything that hadn't been sanitized to her satisfaction. What's even more fascinating is how this fear shaped her public image. Crawford's obsession with cleanliness contributed to her reputation as a perfectionist, but it also revealed a vulnerability that few people saw. Her fear of germs wasn't just a quirk. It was a driving force behind her relentless pursuit of control in a world that often felt chaotic and unpredictable. Alfred Hitchcock. Alfred Hitchcock, the master of suspense and one of the most influential filmmakers of the 20th century, was a man whose fears often mirrored the psychological tension in his films. Among his most peculiar phobias was an intense fear of eggs, a condition known as ovophobia. Hitchcock's aversion to eggs wasn't just a mild dislike, it was an intense reaction that he described as unsettling. He once remarked that the sight of a runny egg yolk was more disturbing to him than anything else, a sentiment that seems fitting for the man who created some of cinema's most chilling moments. This fear wasn't just a private quirk. It influenced his work in subtle but fascinating ways. Hitchcock's films often featured food as a symbol of tension or unease, and some have speculated that his aversion to eggs may have inspired these motifs. For example, in Psycho, the The infamous scene of Norman Bates eating candy while speaking to Marion Crane is laden with an unsettling intimacy, a reflection of Hitchcock's ability to turn the mundane into the macabre. Hitchcock's fear of eggs also extended to his personal life. He reportedly refused to eat dishes that contained eggs and would avoid them entirely at meals. His aversion wasn't just a dietary preference. It was a deeply ingrained fear that revealed the complexity of a man whose genius was often rooted in his own anxieties. Orson Welles. Orson Welles, the visionary filmmaker behind Citizen Kane, was a man of towering intellect and ambition. Yet, few knew that Welles harbored a surprising and deeply personal fear, a profound dread of being touched. This fear, known as haplophobia, shaped much of his behavior and interactions throughout his life. Welles was known to avoid physical contact whenever possible, often keeping a noticeable distance from others during conversations. What makes this fear even more intriguing is how it influenced his work. Welles was a master of visual storytelling, often using physical proximity, or the lack of it, to convey tension and emotion in his films. In Citizen Kane, the use of deep focus and carefully staged blocking creates a sense of isolation and detachment, a reflection of Welles's own discomfort with closeness. Some have speculated that his fear of touch may have stemmed from his childhood, though Welles himself rarely spoke about it publicly. This fear also extended to his personal relationships. Welles was known to be charming and charismatic, but his reluctance to engage in physical contact often created a sense of distance between him and those around him. His fear wasn't just a personal struggle. It was a hidden vulnerability that added another layer of complexity to a man whose genius was as enigmatic as it was groundbreaking. W.C. Fields. W.C. Fields, the legendary comedian and actor known for his sharp wit and larger-than-life persona, harbored a fear that was as peculiar as it was revealing: a deep aversion to children. Fields' fear of children wasn't just a comedic exaggeration for his on-screen persona. It was a genuine discomfort that shaped his personal and professional life. He often avoided interacting with children off-screen and was known to refuse roles that required him to work closely with young actors. What makes this fear even more fascinating is how it influenced his humor. Fields frequently incorporated his aversion to children into his films, creating characters who were grumpy, cantankerous, and hilariously intolerant of the younger generation. This became a defining feature of his comedic style, but it also reflected a deeper truth about his personality. Fields reportedly found children difficult to handle, preferring the company of adults who shared his love of dry humor and intellectual conversation. Fields' fear of children extended to his personal life as well. Despite his public image as a jovial entertainer, he was known to keep his distance from family gatherings that involved young relatives. His aversion wasn't just a comedic trope. It was a genuine phobia that added another layer of complexity to a man who was as enigmatic as he was entertaining. Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire, the iconic dancer and actor whose grace and charm defined an era, was a man of extraordinary talent and extraordinary fears. Among his most unusual phobias was a deep fear of elevators. Astaire's fear wasn't just a mild unease, it was a genuine phobia that dictated how he navigated his daily life. He reportedly avoided elevators whenever possible, opting to take the stairs even in tall buildings. What's particularly intriguing is how this fear contrasted with his on-screen persona. Astaire was known for his effortless elegance and poise, yet his fear of elevators revealed a vulnerability that few people saw. This phobia wasn't just a personal quirk, it influenced his work as well. Astaire was known to request that filming locations be chosen with his fear in mind, ensuring that he could avoid elevators during production. Even in his later years, when his career had cemented him as a Hollywood legend, Astaire's fear of elevators remained. He was known to plan his travel and accommodations meticulously, always ensuring that he could avoid situations that triggered his anxiety. His fear wasn't just a private struggle. It was a hidden aspect of his life that contrasted sharply with the effortless confidence he projected on screen. James Stewart. James Stewart, The beloved star of films like It's a Wonderful Life and Rear Window was known for his everyman charm and relatable demeanor. Yet, behind his affable exterior lay a surprising and deeply personal fear, a profound dread of public speaking. Stewart's fear wasn't just a minor discomfort. It was a persistent challenge that influenced his career and public appearances. What makes this fear even more surprising is how it influenced his iconic performances. Stewart was known for his naturalistic acting style, often delivering lines with a hesitant, stammering quality that endeared him to audiences. This wasn't just a stylistic choice, it was a reflection of his real-life anxiety about speaking in front of others. Stewart reportedly avoided public speaking engagements whenever possible, and when he did appear at events, he often prepared extensively to manage his nerves. This fear also extended to his personal life. Stewart was known to be reserved and private, often avoiding large social gatherings where he might be called upon to speak. His fear of public speaking wasn't just a personal challenge, it was a hidden vulnerability that added depth to a man who was celebrated for his authenticity and relatability. Mae West. Mae West, the bold and unapologetic star who became a symbol of wit and sensuality in Hollywood's golden age, was a woman who seemed fearless on the surface. Yet, beneath her confident exterior lay an unusual and deeply personal fear, a profound dread of aging. West's fear of growing older wasn't just a passing concern. It was a driving force that shaped her career, her public image, and even her personal life. She was known to go to great lengths to maintain her youthful appearance, employing strict beauty regimens and carefully controlling how she was photographed and filmed. What's particularly fascinating is how this fear influenced her work. West often played characters who were unapologetically confident and ageless, a reflection of her desire to defy the passage of time. Even as she aged, she continued to portray herself as a glamorous and desirable figure, refusing to let her fear of aging define her public persona. In her later years, she famously wore wigs, heavy makeup, and costumes designed to maintain the illusion of youth. This fear also extended to her personal relationships. West was known to surround herself with younger acquaintances, perhaps as a way to maintain a sense of energy and youthfulness. Her fear of aging wasn't just a private struggle. It was a hidden vulnerability that added depth to a woman who was celebrated for her larger-than-life confidence and charm. Errol Flynn. Errol Flynn, the swashbuckling star of films like The Adventures of Robin Hood, was the epitome of daring and adventure on screen. Yet, few knew that Flynn harbored a surprising and deeply personal fear, a fear of drowning. This phobia wasn't just a minor concern, it was a genuine anxiety that influenced his life and career. Despite his on-screen persona as a fearless hero, Flynn reportedly avoided water whenever possible and was known to feel uncomfortable during scenes that required him to swim or be near large bodies of water. What makes this fear even more intriguing is how it contrasted with his adventurous image. Flynn was known for performing many of his own stunts, yet he often insisted on using doubles for water-related scenes. During the filming of Captain Blood in the mid-1930s, Flynn reportedly expressed significant discomfort during scenes that involved ships and the open sea, a stark contrast to the fearless pirate he portrayed. This fear also extended to his personal life. Flynn was known to avoid activities like boating or swimming, opting instead to remain on dry land. His fear of drowning wasn't just a private struggle. It was a hidden vulnerability that revealed a different side of a man who was celebrated for his daring and charisma. Rita Hayworth. Rita Hayworth, the glamorous star of films like Gilda, was one of the most iconic actresses of the mid-20th century. Yet, behind her radiant smile and captivating performances lay a surprising and deeply personal fear, a fear of crowds. Hayworth's fear wasn't just a mild discomfort, it was a genuine phobia that shaped her interactions with the public and her approach to fame. She reportedly avoided large gatherings whenever possible, preferring intimate settings where she felt more in control. What's particularly fascinating is how this fear influenced her career. Hayworth was known for her ability to captivate audiences on screen, yet she often struggled with the pressures of public appearances. She reportedly found premieres and award ceremonies overwhelming, sometimes choosing to skip them altogether. Even during interviews, she was known to appear reserved and cautious, a reflection of her discomfort with being the center of attention in a crowded room. This fear also extended to her personal life. Hayworth was known to keep her social circle small, surrounding herself with trusted friends and family. Her fear of crowds wasn't just a personal challenge. It was a hidden aspect of her life that contrasted sharply with the glamorous and confident image she projected to the world. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and comment. Also, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell to get notified of our newest videos. Thanks for watching.